Wonderful. Thanks so much, Connie, and welcome everyone from all around the world. Very excited to be back with you for another exciting webinar on our Agile series. And today's topic is going to be on Agile portfolio planning with Kanban. Now, just as a reminder, we have already, last webinar was transforming to an Agile PMO. It was a 1-hour version of that topic, and so I'm hoping that you will go back and listen to that if you have not yet, since those two topics do build on top of each other. And just so that you know, starting from our, I think, next few webinars, we'll be going back again into giving you some of the basics. What we did last year is we had a host of webinars that are all recorded that talked about requirements gathering, estimating, planning, setting up teams, all those different things, and we will go through many of those popular topics again. But we're obviously in a very advanced topic right now, which is portfolio planning, and I'm going to show you hopefully some practical techniques that you can use to apply lean and agile methods to your portfolio planning. So I think a lot of you know me and know my background, that I grew up through the IT world, and I was a software developer and a Java and a .NET developer for years, and then moved into this bright side of leadership transformation, organizational agility transformation. Again, our website's agiletraining.com, or, and I don't know, I think many of you know that you can also watch a lot of free videos on agilevideos.com, so I hope to see you there. I'd like to kick this off with a thinking workshop. Since you're not physically here with me, I can't have you brainstorm on Post-it notes. So I want you to share with me, what are your top challenges with portfolio planning, prioritization, and management? So for those of you that do that, or maybe you're not part of that, what frustrates you with that whole process of, from an idea, from the concept of an idea being qualified and coming all the way down to getting done? What have been your challenges? And I'm just going to minimize this so I can see some of your responses. Everyone is priority number one, Nancy. Yes. That's the beauty of prioritization. Remote teams, lack of agreement. Not every team has the same standard. Some of them are agile, some of them are not. Competitive initiatives, competing initiatives, conflicting priorities. Many people don't see the big picture. Comparing apples to oranges, prioritization changes, resource constraint, unclear scope, business conflict, government politics, politics, it's the norm. Executives' inability to truly prioritize. They always say, I want it all now, right? Stakeholders not properly defined. Yep, that's a good one. Each stakeholder has their own agenda to achieve. Everyone's project is urgent. Yep. Let's get a couple. No clear requirements. Getting people to understand the plan should change when necessary. Or being scared of change. Financials being set too strictly. Shifting number one, no strategic plan. So very good. Inability to say no. Integration issues. Yep. So that's a great list of some of the top challenges with portfolio planning, prioritization, and management. So let's talk about some ideas for what we can do differently. It really starts with understanding the principles of lean development, since much of what I'm going to talk to you about is how can you start cutting out waste and having more of a lean portfolio management style. And of course, lean and agile. I always say lean and agile got married, and they had a lot of kids, and some of the kids are called Kanban, Scrum, Extreme Programming. Those are the various methods under that umbrella. But principles of lean development really say that we need to optimize the whole, and that's related to one comment that I just saw, which is we don't see the big picture. And that's a core part of lean, is you need to see the full value stream. You need to see the whole thing together to understand. When you're prioritizing at such a low level, and when every department, and quite frankly every manager, is deciding on their own priorities and their own little area of what they need to get done, then resources become constrained, especially in the huge multitasking and matrix world that we live in right now. And so there needs to be some level of optimization of the whole picture. Are we really working on the right stuff? And it's all valuable. No one's ever going to argue that some of these initiatives are not valuable. But do they align really with what we're trying to accomplish this year? Do they align strategically at all? Eliminate waste, obviously, which is finding all the sources of waste, and you just mentioned a whole bunch of them. anything that stops us from adding value or delivering value is wasteful. And so Lean says, can we start focusing on some of these areas, such as the conflicting business priorities, or working on projects that are not valuable, or multitasking people and not getting anything done, basically starting a bunch of things but never really completing them. Those are all signs of large waste. Building quality in means that as we are executing, quality needs to be part of the process, not something we check for at the end of the process. That's a very reactive way. And so that's why with Agile and Lean we talk about continuous feedback loops. So as the project is progressing, we're constantly looking, is this delivering value? Am I getting stuff done? Is this meeting expectations? Can I do testing iteratively within every iteration? Learning constantly, delivering as fast as possible. There's also another saying, which is decide as late as possible. So I like those two. Deliver as fast as possible and decide as late as possible. Engage everyone in the process and obviously keep getting better. Just wanted to show you, a few books that I like. Alan Shalloway's From Net Objectives, Lean Agile Software Development. Mary and Tom Poppendick are the ones that really started the Lean software development movement. And Dean Leffingwell is pretty famous for his best practices for large enterprises. So some resources there for you. Multitasking. If you were here with me physically, I would love to play this game with you because it's a very real game. It's very short, but it really shows what we're doing. But the first version of this game is where I have a team member, someone who acts like they're actually the one that's getting the work done, and they have to serve 4 different customers. That's basically the scenario we're here. 4 different projects want to get done. I only have one team to get that project done. So what the team decides to do in this case is multitask. No customer can wait. Every customer is number 1 priority. And so for me to write your name for you, because that's basically the project, is I have to write your name, I'm going to go ahead and these are my 4 customers. Again, there's no priority here. All of them are important. I'm going to go ahead and write one letter and then write the next letter, and then whoever's screaming the loudest is going to get their letter in. And so we play the game this way, and then we count how long did it take to write each name. Now, Jack over here seems to be screaming the loudest, so he got his name in with no quality defects or anything. So he's obviously probably a senior vice president, or maybe the president of the company, right? But Sarah, Carrie, and Alex, poor Sarah, she really was struggling to get some of her letters in, because remember, this is one person, probably 25%, 25%, 25%, 25% allocated towards these 4 projects, and they're really just trying to satisfy all customers. So this is a pretty chaotic way of getting work done, but it is very real in how we operate, which is to have a team focus on 3 to 4 to 5 projects at the same time, or a person having to get all of them done at the same time, and they just have to figure out who do they listen to next. So then the team says, well, let's get smarter about this, guys. Let's go ahead and get these projects to at least be fair. So for the first customer, I'm going to write a letter for you, and then I'm going to write a letter over here, then I'll give Jack a letter, and I'll give Alex a requirement. Then I'll go back to Sarah and get one more requirement from her, one more requirement. So you can see this is a very fair way, and it's called the each customer has a turn. And so even if I've got 4 projects that I need to get done as an individual or as a team, I'm going to go ahead and give every project one requirement, give it to them, and go to the next project. So you start to see what that does to the numbers, and they're pretty consistent. But the awful thing is that all projects don't get done until the end, because I'm working a little bit on all of them, so we're not really making any real progress. And when you ask customers how happy they are over here, they'll tell you it's better than here, because this was a little bit of a chaos mode, and it was not predictable at all. This is a little bit more predictable, but they'll tell you they're struggling a little bit with starting and stopping, and remembering what their next requirement was, because the team isn't giving them their full focus. So they're playing nice, but pretty high time to market here. So then the team says, well, let's just do lean portfolio management. And what does that really mean? It means that for customers, we need to prioritize you. We need to really look at our company strategic objectives and what will deliver business value for us for this year. You're all awesome. Every project is very important, but we do need to have an order to this chaos, especially that we're dealing with one team right now that needs to operate on these 4 projects, okay? Obviously, if you have 4 teams or 4 different teams, then sure, every one of them picks up one of these requirements and we're good to go. But if you really are limited on your capacity, that you just have this one team that needs to get these projects done, you have to prioritize. And in that case, we did one customer at a time. And so our wonderful team member over here wrote Sarah and then pulled the next requirement, which is Carrie, that next customer. And then when they were done, pulled Jack and said, what's your requirement? Jack wrote that down, and then Alex. You see the numbers over here. You see how time to market increases, right? Within 6 seconds, we already have the first project out. And what's really interesting is even the slowest project, number 4, got done in 22 seconds, which would really beat a lot of the other numbers here. Why? What's the magic of all this? It's focus, right? It's prioritization and focus. And without both of those, you're actually slowing down the whole process. So just in case I didn't make it clear, multitasking projects is the #1 killer of your organization's ability to deliver value effectively. But we do it. We do it all the time. We multitask all the time because it gives us the false illusion of making progress, right? We think that we are getting a lot of stuff done. If I can put Harry and John on the 3 different projects and have them work a little bit in all of them. So it's a challenge. It's where a lot of organizations are today. It's hard to prioritize. We're trying to be nice to everyone. And so let's talk about how this all relates to portfolio planning. The problem is we have ideas. And these ideas keep coming. They never stop. And business folks always and customers have new ideas for things that they want to get done. So what we need to do is probably qualify those ideas and pick the top ones that actually do need to be executed on, or at least be initiated and be investigated. And I always say that the idea qualification step really should be a quick one. It shouldn't require a lot of resources. It should be where basically these ideas have to pass some basic filters of qualification to even know if we should initiate them. An initiation, and I'm sure you guys have a name for all this, some people call it the business case, the idea qualification step, the project feasibility step, whatever you're calling both those together. The idea here is I got to filter the list of this humongous things that everybody wants to do. Then I need to initiate and figure out, based on value, which are the top ones that are really worth doing. So project initiation probably involves a little bit more detailed in terms of a little bit high-level requirements, cost estimation. Is this really worth doing? Do we have the right solutions? Do we even have the capacity? You know, a little bit more information to say, yes, let's go ahead and actually add it to our enterprise backlog. Now, notice what I just said. I didn't say that if it passes here, then we do it right away. What I said is if your project passes initiation, then it should be prioritized in the enterprise backlog so that the team can pull it when it becomes the next top priority project. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So what happens next if the team does pull this project is maybe it's a program. And if it is a program, it means that it is going to be broken down into probably different teams that are getting it done. This team's going to work on this part. Team B is going to work on that part. And again, you'll notice I'll talk a lot about teams as opposed to individuals because we really think that it takes a cross-functional team to get any work done as opposed to individuals. So you start to allocate the work and say, okay, which team can deliver holistically these components and which team can holistically deliver this part over here, right? Each team, so this sort of forms your program master backlog because you're really maybe dealing with a program. In some cases, you're really just dealing with a simple project where it really one team and they'll take these blue items. So think of this as a much bigger item over here, maybe a theme. Or a deliverable, and these are features, and these features are going to be broken down into smaller stories, and the team will break down all this and create their own team backlog at the story level, and then the team might, if they're using Scrum, take those stories and begin to plan them out in various fixed sprints, right? So this item, these 4 over here will get done here, and maybe this one, and this one based on priority. So this really creates now a list of the work that's prioritized top down, not just based on value, but based on dependency. And that's why maybe the word prioritization is the bad word to use, and maybe you should just say it needs to be ordered or sequenced in the right way for execution. And so the team, gets started with sprint number 1, and that's when they begin to take each story and break it down into tasks that need to get done. So this is sort of the big picture of how an idea gets through the whole process. But there's an interesting step over here, which we're going to talk about today, which is how do I qualify it? how do I initiate it and prioritize it before we execute it. Almost all of our other webinars and the future ones will be related to the execution side, but today we're talking about this first phase over here. And if I showed it to you in the life cycle diagram that I normally talk about, and this is one that we've created that we coach a lot of our teams on, is this is the step that we'll be focusing on today, is the project feasibility and initiation. Most of this other step, starting from the yellow over here, is when the team has actually pulled the project and they're ready to execute on it. Then they do a little bit more release planning, iteration 0, setting up the foundation, and then they begin to execute in these iterations to deliver value. And again, this model really depends on the type of project and the size of project. So some teams don't really have projects. They have what I would call minor enhancements, bug fixes, support, small work that just continuously flows. And if that's the case, you're going to need a lot less of all of these initial 3 steps, and you might really just have iterations or just have what we call like a pure continuous delivery Kanban wall, where things are just coming in and out. There's no iterations even. They're just really being tracked via a Kanban wall that items are going through and flowing through the Kanban wall with no specific, oh, I have to do a demo here. There's no iterations. But if you are dealing with a project or strategic initiatives that might have some constraints and does have a specific product owner, then and it's big enough and strategic, then it might go through the whole flow. Right? So again, the context is king. It all depends on the type of project, how much of each step do you do. But I do want to clarify, though, in waterfall, or the traditional process, you still do this step over here. I'm just going to give you some lean and agile ideas for it. You still do planning and requirements gathering, except in agile it probably takes 2 to 3 weeks, where traditionally it's 2 to 3 months of requirements gathering. I bet you still did some design and upfront, architecture, setting up the foundation. In agile, this is just one iteration, where traditionally it might be another 2 to 3 months. And of course, there's still execution, where in agile, the main difference is we're still doing requirements, design, development, testing, and everything through each one of these iterations and sprints, as opposed to waiting until the end to do testing. So that's just sort of a comparison of waterfall versus agile as it relates to this model. Just as a reminder, for those of you that haven't attended other ones, here's a single team view, and a team has the product owner, scrum master, technical leadership. It doesn't have to be an architect, but some level of technical leadership. They have a backlog, and they have a release plan, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to get done in every sprint. This team is probably working in sprints that are 2 weeks or 3 weeks, maximum 4 weeks, and they're consistent, and everything that's in their backlog at this level is down to the story level, right? So probably features and stories are here. Stories are these small deliverables that I can actually get done within 2 to 3 weeks. So we've broken down all the work into such a small chunk that they can actually get accomplished. A program team, and we just talked a little bit about this, will have a backlog as well, but their backlog may be a little bit higher items, such as a group of features, minimal marketable features that need to go to production, less down at the story level, which is what the teams probably care about. And they also have a prioritized list. They probably know which team's working on what part, and as the team is continuously developing, they can begin to pull from the next top item, or they basically have them prioritized down to their level. And this is also just an emphasis that if you do have a program, you need to have a program leadership team, in some cases referred to as Scrum of Scrums in Agile, which is a group of individuals made up of the team members. Some of the product owner, the Scrum Master, the technical leads come back together again here, meet with the sponsor, and talk about how the program is going in terms of progress. And you could also actually put up a physical Kanban wall to show progress at that level. Portfolio level, which is what we're going into next, is where, as an organization, my teams are executing and in 2-week iterations or 3-week iterations and making progress. My program is probably more focused on monthly. How are all teams doing from a monthly perspective, right? Reporting up at that level. And then in my portfolio and my strategy, my team over here, which is the steering committee team, portfolio management team, probably higher level group of individuals over here, are really looking at how is it all going? How are my initiatives, right? Not at the feature level anymore, but probably initiatives, and under every initiative, here's the key themes or deliverables. How are they executing? And here's my next top one, And so when any of my teams below are ready, let them pull my next top priority item from this backlog. And some of the reporting over here could probably be quarterly as opposed to every 2 weeks or every month. So that's just the big picture. There are 6 steps in planning when you're dealing with Agile, and it has to start with strategic planning. We believe that the only way to really know if your project is valuable or not, we have to have a strategy. As an organization, we need to have, okay, here's our vision, and here's our objectives, and here's what's really important for us to accomplish in 2012 or 2013 or 2014. Here's the specific things that we want to accomplish. Because without that clear message of what do we really want to accomplish, and you know what, I'm not going to fault companies because some of them do a good job with some high-level strategy, but quite frankly, they keep it at such a high level that people still don't know how to tie their initiatives back to it. They sort of create the vision and the high-level objectives, but they never take it down into, for this specific year, here are the concrete goals and measures that we want to accomplish so that you can tie your initiative or your project back to it. So that has to be the start of this. Then your organization might be big enough that the work that's coming in needs to be broken down by portfolio groups, right? Maybe it's not just a small company where you're really just one big portfolio, but you have different, here's my, if I'm a banking, here's my mortgage portfolio, and here's my business portfolio, and here's my consumer portfolio, and maybe there's different grouping and categories of the work that needs to be prioritized. And my suggestion would be that you would also organize your execution teams, your value delivery teams by those portfolios. Of course, there's going to be the need for some enterprise level teams that cross portfolios, but at least this would be a good start, is to start focusing the teams that are going to be dedicated or working towards the work within that portfolio. And so portfolio planning is where the specific portfolio team says, here's our top priorities. This is how we're going to implement this strategic vision. And so this vision from a mortgage lending perspective, or from, if you're an insurance company, from the individual market perspective, here's what we're going to do to and prioritize our list of initiatives related to the strategic plan. Then there's product planning. And product planning is where now, for a specific product that you have or a specific service, even though we call it product planning, it could be a product, it could be a service, it could be a process. Here's my vision for where it needs to go to accomplish our goals. So this is where you're doing a lot more visioning and road mapping, right? Visioning and road mapping as in, here's not the vision for just what we need to get done in the next 3 months. Here's where I really see this going, right? So as a product manager or as a process manager or an owner of a specific process, here's where I'm hoping to take this process in the future over the next few releases, or maybe even for the next 2-3 years. All of that, those first 3 steps, I call strategic planning, strategy. So even though a lot of people say this is the strategic planning over here, which is the number 1, which is all good, I really think all of the number 1, 2, and 3 is really about strategically planning and aligning what your enterprise strategy is with how you're really going to get some of this work done. Starting from number 4, which is release planning, this is what we do when we have a specific initiative now that's been prioritized based on this upfront planning, and this is the one that needs to get done next, right? So I actually have a release coming up in 3 months or 6 months or whatever your release cycle is, and I need to get some specific work done. So this is where we say, all right, let's go ahead and take that item, break it down into stories, and this is normally where you have a team involved. So think of these 3 steps over here are things that happened in that life cycle diagram at that very first and second step. And release planning is where the team got engaged in that yellow box, and now they're starting to plan out their work in small, much more small items. Iteration planning is because a release is made up of multiple of those fixed sprints or fixed iterations, where we now take the work and slice it into the iterations like that picture that I just showed. And then there's something called daily planning, which is where every day the team begins to figure out, am I getting the tasks done? Are we getting the story done? Are we not? What's impeding us? What's slowing us down? So for those that think that, because I heard this rumor, that Agile teams don't do any planning, I just want to make sure we correct the record that there is a lot of planning. And if you're not doing any planning, you're probably not doing Agile the right way. So 6 levels of planning, again, these are more tactical. 4, 5, and 6 are more tactical, execution related, and these are more strategic. So what are some of the high-level steps when you're just trying to do the upfront planning of your portfolio? I wanted to create a quick checklist that you can see what we do when I'm going in and when our company's going in and helping organizations do this. This is sort of our checklist. We say, all right, you got to define the clear vision, objectives, and measurable goals, which we just talked about. That's number 1. That's the strategic plan. Some level of consensus on business value buckets and some qualification filters. So what I mean by that is instead of the normal who screams the loudest method of prioritization, right? Maybe you should come together especially at the enterprise level and say, what does define value for us in this organization? What are we trying to accomplish this year? How do we objectively say if this initiative or this idea is better than the other one from our strategic perspective? So instead of it just being by rank, it really should be an objective method, and I'll show you what business value points look like. And you should have also and build some consensus around idea qualification, right? So we can't just take every idea and execute on it. So which ideas are we going to execute on? And what is the filter for making this idea a good idea or a bad idea? Build and groom the portfolio backlog. So actually having some sort of a backlog that's groomed and cleaned up and broken down at the right level. And I think that's critical. I think sometimes too many ideas are so grandiose that they haven't been groomed. And what I mean by grooming is really break it down. Tell me, at least in 3 months or shorter, what would be some of your deliverables? How are you really going to show me value from this big idea that's going to take 10 years to get done? So grooming the backlog and breaking it down into smaller chunks will always help. Strategic alignment, so taking these items now that we have, those initiatives that have been broken down, and aligning them with which one of our strategic objectives for this year is it really going to align with. Giving it the business value points, assessing risk and dependency, and then finally, and this is an activity that we normally do in a day or two, create a ranked backlog. And a ranked backlog means that taking all this stuff into account, now that we have taken this group of initiatives and ideas and projects, and we've done dependency on them, risk, assess the business value, align them with our strategic, then in what order? I don't want to hear that they're all high or they're all number 1. There's a pretty nice vertical list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It needs to be sequenced that way, right? Where we normally break off and miss the point is even after we do this, we forget about this last most critical step, which is the stable team capacity planning. Now that you have this wonderful backlog, can you take a look at your stable teams or that your team capacity? How much can you really even get done, and which team is really ready to pull the next item? So some level of understanding of capacity and understanding that you need to move to this pull model, which means that this ranked backlog of projects from the very top will be pulled and the team will get work done in that way. Here's an example of the chart that we create for something like this. It's as simple as, here's my business value, and I'm sure you've seen something similar to this like this before. Here's my size. Here are my initiatives, right? So without putting any items in here, here are the initiatives. And after we've had this wonderful portfolio discussion and we've done some level of alignment, we realize that this item over here has pretty low value, but it's also small. But the problem is it has risk. If you can see, this big R means that it has pretty big risk associated with it. So even though these over here have the highest value, this team, when they did portfolio planning, decided to make this number 1 in terms of a rank, right? As you can see over here, one of our top value items is this number 5, and it actually is medium in size, so high level. It's really not that big. So we could probably get this one done pretty quickly because it sits in we call this quadrant right up over here, the biggest bang for the buck quadrant, right? If you're small but you have high value, it's like a no-brainer. It should get you done. But this one depends on number 2 over here, so that's why this item was made as number 2. So 1, 2, they did this one as 3, that one became number 4 next, 5, 6, 7, 8, you get the process. The process is, it's never as simple as, well, everything that has the highest value over here will be number 1, and then this will be number 2, 3, 4, based on value. It really, when you're doing this exercise, you have to take all 3 things into account. Value, obviously, four things into account: value, size, dependency, and risk, because you might make completely different decisions when you realize that something, even though it has low value, is a mandate project by the government and has a pretty steep deadline and a pretty big fine if it doesn't get done, and so it really does become your number one or number two priority. This is an example from a real workshop. So this was the output from an actual team that we were doing this with, a large company, and these were some of the initiatives for 2012. And so here's the final, some of the ranking that they came up with. And so risk, right, small risk versus big risk, some level of dependency. And just so that you know, the straight line means that it really is a pretty strict dependency. You really can't start number 5 without doing number 2, or a dotted line means that it's a preferred dependency. It's almost like, well, yeah, you know, you really should probably do number 3 first before you do that one up over here. So that's called the biggest bang for the buck prioritization method, and that becomes the final output of a lot of the activities that I'm going to go through right now. But I wanted to share that with you from the very beginning so you could see what are we driving towards in terms of how we do this activity. This could be the end result of the ranking of the top down, because that's what everyone normally asks, is how do you get to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? Well, it's through this conversation and through some level of level setting and setting context for business value buckets and idea qualification. So one of the first things we said is, as you brainstorm and put together your list of projects, which I would start with your current projects and then your future initiatives, you need to start breaking them down. And you can't just bring in an item that's just an initiative and it's huge, it's an epic, and then say, well, let's prioritize that. That's too big. If it's too big, you should at least break it down into themes. Some people call those deliverables or releasable deliverables. This could be an actual small release. It could actually go to production with something like this. So when you're doing portfolio prioritization, I would highly suggest at least sticking to items that are at this level. I don't think you need to have features and stories, because that's way too small when you're doing portfolio level prioritization, but the initiatives should, you know, at least be small, medium, large. Anything that becomes very large is probably my suspect for, I think you need to be broken down into smaller chunks, right? An example of this is, let's say I have an initiative called Member Portal, and under Member Portal there's a lot of different things. This is, let's say, an example of an insurance company, and where they're going to create this wonderful portal environment for you to check on your health insurance and your benefits. And so one part of that portal is the claims area, right? And under claims there's going to be a ton of features, but one of those features is ability to manage claims. And here's an example of 2 stories, which is, as a member, I want to view my current unpaid claims, and as a member, I want to view the details of a claim. So that takes you down to a story level. And this is what we call the deep dive. This is the real details behind a specific story, and they're the acceptance criteria. So as a member, I want to view my current unpaid claims really breaks down to this small level. Now, I'm showing you this, not that it has anything to do with portfolio planning right now, but just to show you, when you're looking at these levels, this is what it could translate into. And you probably want to stay at least at the initiatives. If it's really this big, have a list of your, I want to have claims. And maybe if you want to go down to manage claims, that's up to you. It depends on what level do you want to break things down. Definitely not go down to this detail level yet, because that's more of the how. So strategic planning. The output of that should be your company vision, objectives, which a lot of companies do well on those 2 areas. And I think where they fall is goals for this year, specific goals that we need to accomplish this year, and how are we going to measure success? What's our definition of done for this year? When we're done, we should have accomplished what by the end of the year? I think having it down to that level is extremely important because it helps guide the rest of the projects. Next, we can talk about business value buckets. What is important to our company? So when a project comes in and says, well, I'm very valuable, what does that really mean? So for some organizations, here's some 4 buckets, and this is a cheat sheet that I've provided for you in the download. So I think one of our last slides here will give you a link to download this presentation and the soft copy of the cheat sheet. But this basically is a cheat sheet that says, let's just say this is your company. You do projects because they either generate money for you, or you'll do an initiative or an idea because it's going to save you money, or possibly because it's going to improve customer satisfaction, or maybe competitiveness. Maybe competitiveness and customer satisfaction are in the same bucket. Or maybe you're doing it because it's a compliance reason, right? You have to do it. So maybe those are the main 4 value drivers for any project. Well, in addition to deciding on your buckets, you need to decide what's the weighting of each bucket. And I just like to make this simple. Which one is a multiplier of 2 or which one is a multiplier of 3? And so in this company, basically, this example, saving money, improving customer satisfaction, compliance are all times 1, but generating money for us this year is a times 2. And this, by the way, could change from year to year. It doesn't have to stay stagnant. Maybe next year you realize that your customer satisfaction rating is really low, and so any projects that improve customer satisfaction will get a weighting of 2 or 3, right? So I think your buckets should stay stable in general, and your weighting could change based on your strategic drivers every year. And so how would you really do this? So maybe there's a whole initiative that we need to begin to accept PayPal payments, right? Because we don't accept PayPal right now, or we need to accept credit cards online. And so I would walk that initiative, that idea, it's a great idea. Will you generate money for me this year? Is that light, medium, high, or very high value? Now I'm going to tell you, for almost all companies that we coach with this, generating money and saving money should have some dollar amount or a range with every part of the bucket. So if you're saying that by me accepting credit card payments or PayPal now, we are going to generate money, and you're saying, well, it's high value, what does high value mean? As an organization, you should say, well, that's between 100,000 to 300,000, or maybe light is greater than 50, greater than 100, a million. I have one company right now that said their light value of generating is less than $1 million. This one's $1 million to $2 million. This one's $5 million plus, and high value is 5 to over 10 million. So, but that's important, because then you'll have people just arbitrarily say, yes, I will generate a lot of money. There needs to be a number associated with it so that we can hold you accountable later for actually showing if you've delivered it or not. So accepting credit card payments, in this case over here, it's medium value, let's just say. Saving money, no, not really. We're not going to save any money from this. Improving customer satisfaction, yeah, there's some light value to that. And there's no compliance reason. So based on that, just quick exercise, 20 points times 2 is 40, plus 1 is 50, and so I drop it. This is a medium to high basically value project, but we'll keep that number 50 next to it so we can help qualify it against other ideas that are coming down the pipeline. So I hope that was a quick overview of how you could use this cheat sheet. And here's an example from a real company, because I thought you might like to see real examples, even though it's messy. That shows you their buckets was to generate money, save money, customer satisfaction, keep the lights on. So some projects need to be done because they're keeping the lights on, innovation, and then they're going to help us become more competitive. And their weighting was times 2, times 1, times 2, times 1, times 1, and I think this one was times 2. So we at least set that foundation before we could prioritize and assign business value points to each initiative. So let's go through now and talk about what qualification filter should you have for each idea that comes in. Should we do it? Should we not do it? Well, first of all, you might ask, does it align with the strategic direction? Does it deliver measurable value based on what you just did over here with it? Is it low-hanging fruit or not? Conditions of success. Do I have a committed business owner? Is there someone who's really going to see this through or not? Do I even have the capacity to do it? Is it even feasible? Is it the kind of technology that we actually have? So an example of an Agile idea qualification checklist, and obviously you need to create your own, but here's something that I'm helping you get started with, is, all right, so an idea comes in. Do you align with strategic objectives? Did you deliver measurable value? This is critical from an Agile perspective. Is there the right product owner committed and available to get it done? So why are we working on projects if there's no one from the customer who's committed to seeing it through, right? Because this is the biggest problem that we have, is where a team takes an initiative or someone's idea, executes on it with no engagement with the original person who had the idea as a product owner, and then when we finally go to testing, well, you didn't meet my expectations. Well, of course I'm not going to meet your expectations. If I was building a house for you guys, how often would you come down and take a look at that house that we're building for you? You would come down every single day. And when I ask the people, why would you do that? Well, it's because I'm spending my own money and I want to make sure the project is done right. Well, exactly. You're spending the company money, and the project does need to be done right, and that's why we need you to be committed to engage. If you don't have the capacity to engage right now, let's pull the next item. So even though you're the highest priority item, maybe you're very important, and that would be really weird if you're number one priority, but you don't have time, we'll need to pick the next item, because we have found from Agile that pulling projects and getting them done with no committed customer, product owner, someone to see it through from the business side, the people that have requested it, is just a formula for failure. Does it have a clear definition of done? So is your idea pie in the sky? Or is it something that really we can see that, oh, this is done when we've accomplished this, this, and that? Can it deliver value within 3 to 6 months, right? Can we break it down into a small chunk that we know within the next 3 to 6 months, here's what we're going to get done. Within the following 3 to 6 months, here's what we'll get done next. And even if the items that we are getting done, and I'm saying by done isn't like actually move it to production, maybe it's just a pilot. Maybe it's something where we don't really have the whole world use it yet, but we're at least testing it in production. And I know some of you are going to struggle and say, well, Sally, no, some of our projects we can never break down into 3 months or 6 months. They are multi-year projects. I understand. I am just challenging you to think about any way of slicing it to where some value can be achieved in a smaller chunk. Even if it was a system replacement project, can we at least force the team to think that way? Because when you allow projects to just go for 2 to 3 years without delivering anything, you've made that the norm, that I don't really have to show you anything until that long. So feasibility, did it get enough confidence votes? Now, here's an example of a project definition of done. So your project came to me, your initiative, and you said, I'm going to eliminate dual entry, right? There's people right now that are filling out the application here, and then they're going to that other screen. This is maybe a sales application where the sales rep is entering a lead over here and having to look it up in another system. And so that's my value. That's what I'm going to deliver. Well, I'd like you to at least tell me a little bit more. So what's your measure for that? And maybe the measure should be cycle time of entering a lead, then finding the record. So from the beginning of someone putting in the lead in the first system, and then finding the record back, you're trying to reduce it from 10 minutes to 2 minutes. Wonderful, at least we now have some numbers. Your stretch goal is less than 2 minutes of that whole cycle time. And if it's taking them still 5 minutes or more, then you really haven't. You've failed. You haven't eliminated dual entry. So usability. Usability is a big one that people don't know how to measure. So how easily can a new sales rep be trained to use the system? Might be what the gist is of what I'm trying to measure. The measure is the time required to train a typical sales rep to go through, enter the lead and track it back. If I can get that done within 2 minutes, that's great. If I don't give you any training and it takes 0 minutes to get that done, then that's my stretch. And if the person's still fiddling around for 10 minutes, then you have failed the improved usability. The only reason I'm going down to this level of detail is to describe and explain that too many projects promise so much value that we never hold the projects accountable for proving. And that's why I think from the very beginning in idea qualification, project initiation, this very first part of portfolio planning, we should hold people accountable to putting a little bit of metrics around how are they going to do it. Even if it's not a specific dollar amount, what really are you cutting? Here's the Kanban wall that you can set up to help ideas go through this. And a Kanban wall, if you're not familiar with Kanban, is basically a big visible wall that says, here's the stuff that's in the queue. So anyone who has an idea, here's my queue of the next top ideas that we're trying to qualify. And I'm going to put as the columns the value stream steps. What I mean by that is, in order for an idea to be qualified, here's the main steps that we need to go through for it to be approved to go to initiation, for example, more investigation. And in this case, I just showed you as an example, value justification should be number 1, in my opinion, feasibility assessment, and then do I even have enough confidence votes based on this conversation at this stage of the business case, to actually approve it for initiation. And so if you had a big wall up like this, and maybe you have a portfolio team, that's what they do. They'll pull the next item over here, and they'll say, we need you to do value justification, Mr. Product Owner, or Mr. Person who wants this project to get done. And value justification could include those 2 steps over here. Does it align with strategic objectives? Does it deliver measurable value? Does it have a clear definition of done? Can it deliver value within 3 to 6 months, right? So you could say those are the 4 questions we want you to answer. That's my definition of done for this column. And we either kill you or we approve you for the next step, okay? this one over here, initiative, got killed, and so one of them actually made it to the feasibility assessment. And that's where we answer questions like, do we have the right people? What are we really thinking this is going to accomplish? Do we have the right technology to support this idea? And then maybe you either get killed or you move on. Do we feel confident enough that this is even worth initiating? And if it passes here, then maybe that's where it goes into the next few columns, which is more of the qualification step, right? Now, you might use a similar wall. You might simplify this wall. You might make it more complicated. All I'm suggesting is start with a wall somewhere, not just an electronic tool. Not that you can't have your project list in a tool somewhere, but make it visible so that you can at least see the process and see how much is really going through and being filtered, because some of these steps we really don't do today. You know, an idea comes in, someone screams the loudest, gets it approved somehow, and then we work on it right away. Value measurement is always a challenge because we're trying to figure out how do we measure value, and I've got another quick 6 steps over here for measuring value. Identify and confirm the strategic value drivers, align my project with one of those, identify what can we measure, and this was an example that I just showed you. What is the metric that I'm actually going to measure? Gather the facts about the current as is, define the target, measure value. So the example that I just showed you over here was an example of that. This is how we can measure value, right? Is to align myself with some strategic objectives and then put some numbers behind it. Another example is, let's say my company says operational efficiency was one of their strategic goals for this year, for 2012, and my project has the objective of automating the application entry process. So then my metric will be cycle time for an e-application. My current is there's 3,000 applications per week. 20% of them take less than 2 minutes. 80% are taking 6 weeks, or 2 to 6 weeks to actually get done. So that's my current. I've gathered the facts, right? So that's my as is. So what is your target then? Well, I want 90% of these 3,000 applications to take less than 2 minutes to get processed, and only 10% of them that will take at least less than a week because they'll require some manual intervention. All right, tell me about dollars then. How much does that save me? Well, that's about 15,000 per week, 780 per year, blah, blah. You come up with the numbers. But this is an example of, here's the strategic company driver, and here's how my project will help accomplish that. And just make it simple. Don't overcomplicate it, but at the same time, don't skip it to where you're not holding people accountable for at least figuring out what problem are you really trying to solve. So actually measuring value post-release is a good discussion, right? Because you can do all this at the beginning, and then the project actually moves to production, and no one comes back and says, did you really accomplish that? Did all that stuff that we promised at the beginning? So my recommendation is hold the product owners, not the project manager. Why project manager? Hold the product owner, the person who came in and justified this project, accountable for coming up with this from the very beginning. When will we measure this value that you just promised? 6 months, 3 months after project completion, when? How will you measure it? Do you need a report? Are you going to run a survey? What are we going to do? Because that probably might be added to the backlog of work that needs to get done. And then who is going to be accountable for reporting it back? That's a promise and a plan that you need to come up with from the very beginning so we can execute on it at the end. Why don't we actually do this is a good question. Why is this so difficult? Well, I think some of the problems with idea qualification is it's just not part of our process, right? Or we have the who screams the loudest method. That's how we do it today. Or someone comes in and says, this is just going to be awesome, and that equals my ROI qualification. I've already told you, I'm the president, and I'm just telling you this is going to be a good project. Let's just do it anyway. Or domination and lack of participation. Maybe some people, again, are screaming the loudest, so everyone else just says, okay, fine, whatever. Inconsistency. Some projects do it. Some projects go through the exceptions. There's a lot of others, probably, that stop you. And some of the root cause that you can begin to work on if you don't have a good step for all this is maybe there's no single point of entry for the ideas. Maybe ideas are coming in and going directly to the manager who's in charge of the team. Maybe that's where you need to start, is before we can qualify the ideas, we have to create a single point of entry for some of these enterprise ideas that help qualify them, right? Hopefully you guys agree on that, is that there's got to be a place for these ideas to come through, whether it's at the enterprise level or at the portfolio level. They can't just randomly be emailed to different people, because that's what causes the multitasking headache. Maybe you don't have a formal step that's integrated within your process. Maybe your process is too rigid. Maybe you're one of those large companies that you have such a big list of deliverables and documents and templates and fill this and fill that, that everyone's finding the way around that process. So instead of, or you've got this one process that, one size fits all, maybe you need to reduce it a little bit and make it a little bit easy to engage with. Again, like the Kanban wall would be a really easy, engaging way to get this done. Of course, you still need a business case, so you need some level of documentation. But what I love about the idea of the Kanban wall for portfolio is that it's more of a collaborative discussion. The team's coming together with the business owner, the product owner, and having this conversation on the wall to say, here's why you pass, and here's why we don't think you pass, and here's what you should go do to still get through the process. Or maybe you're a small enough company that you really just don't have a lot of portfolio management practices yet, and you're just getting started, so maybe that's what you really need to focus on. So maybe start with that Kanban wall as a great place to start. Yes. Wonderful. Very good. Thank you. When an idea gets qualified, right, so you've been through some of this, then you're going to go, so we've already figured out the vision. Does it align with my strategy? Does it have measurable value? Is it feasible? Now, I might need to do a little bit more. So why don't you start breaking down the actual requirements and give me some high-level cost estimate? What are some alternative solutions to what you're doing? Should we buy? Should we build? What is the roadmap of delivery? So again, those first qualification filters were a really quick, fast way to say, should we even look at this further or not? And you want to spend so much time on it, you want to easily figure out if the idea should even be considered or not. But once you decide, yep, you know what, this does align with value, it is broken down, it is something that we can probably take a look at, then you're really going into the initiation step, which is answering some more of these questions. How and when we measure value, and then should we really add it to the backlog or not? So maybe these are the additional columns that you have on the same wall, or maybe it's a different wall, which is, okay, so here's the ideas, but they've already been qualified. Now, first step is we need you to really create a roadmap of what you think you're going to deliver when. So give me more requirements. This is where you really have to break it down, probably down to the feature level. You're still not getting to stories here, but at least give me some of your themes and features that you're hoping to deliver, and some vision of your roadmap of what you think you're going to deliver when at a high level. Alternative solution analysis, which is, should we buy, should we build, have you even made some decisions around that? High level cost estimation, high level, because, and honestly, until you actually get the team to do any level of more real sizing for you at the story level, all of this is still, it could be very high level, and it could be like 4 times away, right? They say that's 100,000, it could be really, it could be 50, it could be 200, but at least you're doing some level of high estimation, and then maybe at the end the business case is reviewed, it's either killed or approved, and if it's approved, then it really goes into our backlog and gets prioritized on when does it happen. The problem with what happens here is, even for those of you that have the business case, once the business case is approved, it's almost like it becomes approved for execution. That's the problem. Every single idea that gets qualified and approved, you can't just approve it for execution, and then what happens is the project manager goes and tries to allocate resources immediately. Well, that's what we call the push method. The push method is where the resources are already working on other projects, and now you're asking for 20% of their time, 30% of their time, 50% of their time to try to get this project done. And that's the multitasking hell that we're in, is because projects are being pushed upon the teams, as opposed to when they're done with something, they're pulling your next priority. So that's why I say what this is really approved for, and maybe this really even say approved for backlog prioritization, because it really needs to be put in the backlog in the right order so that the next team that's available can pull it and get it done, as opposed to, again, stealing and robbing resources from every other project. I think we already talked about this. Alternative solution analysis is this is something that you do today anyway. What are the various options that I have, and how can I really go through and look at these various solutions? So, final thoughts over here is portfolio grooming, which is portfolio management. how would you really groom this wall? Well, you need to have some sort of a portfolio team groom this wall frequently for new ideas that are coming in the pipeline. I've got some companies that want to do this every 2 weeks, you know, where the team gets together, looks at the wall, figures out, okay, here's the top priority items that are trying to be qualified, here's the ideas, let me walk them through it. Some people want to do it weekly and take a look at it and see if the items are moving down the list. But you do need to create some sort of a rhythm for how frequently this wall is being moved or reviewed, or items are being, what visibility, what rhythm do you have in terms of managing that backlog of ideas that want to go through the qualification initiation so that they're ready to get put in the backlog. Now, what I'm also suggesting is, in addition to this continuous grooming, which is whatever cadence you want to create, executives, and I really say executives, need to have a nice big wall that shows them what initiatives are really underway, right? And so this is not just the qualification side, this is the execution side, the actual portfolio execution and management. How are those things going? The ones that are in execution right now, are they delivering value? Are they not delivering value? Should we stop something that's not adding value? Should we reprioritize? And since we've started to do this at the quarterly level, and even sometimes more frequently, I can't tell you how many initiatives and projects we actually stop. And that's wonderful value, because you look at it and you're like, why is this team working for so long on this item that doesn't align at all with what we're trying to get done this year? And it really takes an executive team to make a decision to say, you know what, let's stop that. Let's stop the team from working on it, and here's the next priority item, instead of trying to push 3 or 4 against that team. What does my enterprise velocity look like? So the 5, 6, 10, 20 teams that I've got executing, how much work are they really getting done? Not just getting started, and that's a metric that you should really be conscious of. Not how many projects you're starting, because that's what we call work in progress. How many of them are you really getting done? And if your WIP limit is high, if you can tell that you've got 25, 30, 40, 100 projects all in progress, that actually shows you that you have a lot of waste, because it means that you're not focusing on getting stuff done. You're focusing on starting more initiatives than you are focused on completing them. So I would love to go into a long discussion about capacity planning, but that will be for another webinar. So I hope that you enjoyed some of the ideas that we've talked about today. You can download this presentation and many of the cheat sheets that I showed you, and I think I even have the version 1 survey on Agile development statistics from tinyurl.com/agile training. I hope you'll register for our upcoming webinars. Please visit agilevideos.com too. Let me know what you think of some of these videos, and let's go ahead and open it up for questions.